The second thing is for those of us that were in the lab 2.5 weeks ago, where we ended up doing our beef quality assurance certification. I just ran across a couple of news articles over the weekend that's talking about a lot of producers, not the producers, the like the meat packers and stuff are going to be requiring BQA certification from the people that they're going to be buying cattle from. Just one of them the other day, I can't remember which one. It's like their goal is by the end of this year, 90% of the beef that they buy is Cargill. I think 90% of the beef that they're going to be buying is going to come from Cargill, from suppliers that are BQA certified. So it's a good thing that we did that 2.5 weeks ago. And for those of you online that didn't do that, I'm going to try to post if I didn't already do it, some video links and that kind of stuff. And I would encourage you to go ahead and get your BQA certification. And we may look into, in the future, trying to do some of the PQA for pork and look into more of that kind of thing. Because that whole quieter, more humane handling of your cattle and stuff is being more and more important. So.
Oh, yeah. I actually need to do my PQA certification. I haven't done that yet.
Slacker.
Yeah, I know. So if y'all do that, I can do it with you.
Okay.
But is that all you had, Tom?
Yes, that's it.
Okay. In the spirit of being Thanksgiving week, I'm going to keep it pretty easy this week. Today, I'm just going to go over your test and go through all of those questions, see if you have any questions. And I want to go through and make sure that you know what the correct answer was supposed to be, and then answer any questions you may have. And then actually, I'm thinking that I'm going to cancel class on Wednesday since it is right before Thanksgiving and we're really ahead of schedule, actually.
We don't actually have classes Wednesday. Today's the only day of the week we have classes. So.
Oh, okay. On my thing that I saw, I thought it was just Thursday, Friday. Well, that works then.
Oh, yes. No.
Oh, okay. Good. Because I was looking. I don't know what calendar I was looking at.
I don't know, but you can go ahead and cancel a non-existent class if you want to and get credit for it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's what I was wondering. I was going to ask you this morning if y'all actually had class on Wednesday, but I thought that I had seen that it was just Thursday, Friday, but perfect. Okay. Well, I'm just going to keep today pretty short and quick. I know that going into a bunch of new information right before the holiday never really works. So we're just going to go over your exam. So it's not going to be a terribly long class. Before I get started, for those of you that are seated, when I graded your exams, I momentarily forgot that the last two were extra credit questions. I graded them like normal questions. So your grade in the grade book is going to be about 2 points higher than what it was on your test because I went back and made that correction and graded them like extra credit questions. So make sure you check your grade in the grade book and check how I added it up on your test. And if you have any questions, let me know. But just want to let you know that some of you got points back. All right. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is just a test. If you took it online, you've already seen it and you know what this looks like. So I'm just going to go through each question. And you can see the answer on most of them, but I want to go over them. Stop me if you have any questions because your final exam is going to be cumulative. So you're going to see questions like this again. So make sure that you understand it. And if you have any questions or you've seen your graded test and you got something wrong and you want to know why you got it wrong, now's your chance to ask me. So the first question was just which of these correctly explains the central dogma of molecular biology. So kind of just basically the theory and how things happen. And so that would be the DNA to RNA to protein. So DNA is transcribed to RNA, and then RNA is going to be translated to protein. And then those proteins are how your body's going to kind of function. So all of that is encoded in your DNA. So this one was number 2 was a matching. So just match the cell organelle with its main function. So the nucleus, remember we talked about the nucleus is where you have the chromosomes, and the chromosomes are what have your DNA. So the majority of the cell DNA is in the nucleus. There is some DNA in another part of the cell. Does anybody remember where that is? There's another organelle that has its own DNA. Anybody know? The mitochondria? Does that ring a bell? So the mitochondria actually have their own DNA as well, because it's kind of thought that maybe that organelle was separate from the cell at one time, and then it kind of got engulfed like way back when. So mitochondrial DNA actually always comes from the mother. So if you think back to when we were talking about horses, and they could actually track different changes in mitochondrial DNA through the different animals, because that comes from the mother. So just a fun little fact, but most of the cell DNA is going to be in the nucleus. So the mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell because they produce ATP, and ATP is the major energy source for all cells. So every process in the body needs ATP. The ER, or endoplasmic reticulum, is where proteins are going to be synthesized. So that's where translation is going to occur. And then the cell membrane, of course, is going to surround the cell. So it's going to kind of be the gatekeeper for what comes in and out of that cell. So it contains transporters for different ions and nutrients, as well as receptors for hormones, because hormones signal different things to the body. And in order for a hormone to actually act on a cell, it's got to have a transporter, or a receptor, to bind to. The Golgi apparatus, I always think of it as like the post office of the cell, because it's basically going to get all of these proteins that have been made, and it's going to modify them if they need it, and then it's going to sort them, and it'll kind of mark them if they need to go outside of the body, or if they need to be degraded, or if they're just going to somewhere else in the cell. So kind of acts like that post office type function. Does everybody understand those functions of the different parts of the cell? Any questions? So we just talked about the central dogma, so DNA to RNA to protein. So the production of RNA from the DNA template is going to be called what?
Transcription.
Transcription, right. And it's a dead giveaway because it's checked on the screen. So, so that's going to be transcription. And then when you're going from RNA to protein, because DNA to RNA is kind of similar, you're kind of just transcribing it. But from RNA to protein, it's kind of like almost another language. So that's going to be called translation. That kind of helps me keep it straight. So this question, number 5, was transcription occurs in the cytoplasm and translation occurs in the ER. Can anybody tell me what's wrong with that? It's obviously false. So which part is incorrect?
The cytoplasm part. Transcription doesn't occur in the cytoplasm.
Right, exactly. Transcription is going from DNA to RNA, and most of the DNA is in the nucleus. So if that's where the DNA is, that's where transcription is going to happen. So that's going to be in the nucleus. So exactly, it's not in the cytoplasm. So number 6 was just which of these is not a function of the GI tract, because the GI tract has a lot of different functions. Obviously, feed, food, and digestion is a big one for the GI tract. Immunological protection against organisms, and then absorption of nutrients and water. So the one that was not of primary function of the GI tract would be control and communication throughout the body. And which system would that be that would handle that responsibility?
Nervous system.
Exactly. Yep. Good job. So number 7, the process of digestion involves enzymes. So enzymes are what catalyze the breakdown of complex chemicals. That one was kind of one that a lot of people struggled with. Enzymes kind of encompass a lot of different categories. So for example, we talked about phytases. Phytases are a specific type of enzyme. So what I was looking for here was just enzymes in general. So number 8, which of the following is not true about blood vessels? So we talked about how arteries take blood away from the heart because they start with A, and away starts with A. That's how I keep it straight. Veins bring it back to the heart. And then, of course, your capillaries are going to take nutrients and oxygen and hormones and remove any cell waste and kind of connect the arteries. So the incorrect one here was that arteries bring blood back, and that's false because that would be veins. Number 9 was just a simple true-false. Respiration in birds differs from mammals because birds have air sacs and mammals do not. that is true. If you think back to the poultry lecture, I think I had a picture of all the different air sacs that they have, and that also kind of helps them be a little bit lighter. It helps them with kind of flight a little bit. So definitely a difference between birds and mammals. Number 10, which is not a type of muscle. We talked about the major 3 types of muscle. So that would be skeletal or striated, smooth muscle, and then cardiac muscle, which would be like around the heart. And then nervous muscle, of course, is not a type of muscle because you're going to have nervous tissue. The nervous system is not a muscle. So most people got that one. Number 11, maintaining constant conditions in the body is known as homeostasis. I'd say most people got that one correct because we talked about how homeostasis is just maintaining constant conditions overall, whether it's constant glucose levels or constant temperature or constant pH. All of those processes fall under homeostasis. And so then there actually is the regulation of temperature specifically, and what is that called? Does anybody remember?
Was that thermoregulation?
Thermoregulation, exactly. Yep. So that's kind of almost like a type of homeostasis that's specifically dealing with temperature regulation. Also, sorry, my hands are like all over. I talk with my hands, so that's why they're like all over the screen. So 2 functions of the skeleton. You could have just put any of these. I just wanted to. So it's a framework for the body. It provides points of attachment for muscles, and therefore it allows movement. It protects vital organs. For example, the skull is really, really important because that would protect your brain. And then, of course, storage of calcium and phosphorus in the bones as well. So if you put any of those or anything close to those, that makes sense. I gave you credit. Excuse me. So number 13 was what are chemical messengers that work with the autonomic nervous system to maintain homeostasis and control functions? That would be hormones. Because hormones are what's secreted and goes and binds to the receptors on the cell membrane, and then it can actually act on a cell and maintain homeostasis that way. Number 14, in adipose tissue, which is just fat tissue, energy is mainly going to be stored in the triglyceride form. So I know we talked about like monoglycerides, diglycerides, but triglyceride with the 3 fatty acids and a glycerol is how energy is going to be mainly stored in fat tissue. It's going to just be in that form, and then it can be broken down kind of as the body needs it. So intramuscular fat that improves the eating qualities of meat. And so this is important if you're ever going to be like a meat scientist or if you wanted to pick out a good steak at the grocery store. This is a good one to know. And so the answer to that one would be marbling. So it's kind of a weird word in a way, but I guess if you kind of just think of like a marble countertop, I don't know, it looks kind of like it's marbled. Not really sure where the term came from, but that is what it is, and that's that intramuscular fat that you see in your meat. And so, fun fact, I actually just learned recently, which is crazy because I'm in the pork industry, that it's very important for beef, which I knew, but a lot of people will actually pick their pork loin and things based on marbling as well. And apparently with pork, the color is actually more important for the eating quality than the actual marbling is. So if you're trying to pick out a good pork loin, you want to go with one that's a little more red because that's going to apparently have better flavor. So the marbling really doesn't matter as much. Just something I learned the other day, but I thought that was very interesting because prior to that, I was totally looking at the marbling in pork too. So number 16, which of the following is true about the nervous system? Responsible for control and communication, which we already said, consists of the brain, spinal cord, and then other sensory organs and nerves that connect organs to the rest of the body. And then electrochemical signals are transmitted by nerve cells, which are known as neurons. So all of those were correct about the nervous system. So number 17, what are the 2 major metabolic hormones? And list one function of each. most people got at least part of this question. I think some people kind of got confused with the metabolic hormones and reproductive hormones. So if that's the case, I really tried to kind of give partial credit on this one if I could. But the answer that I was looking for the metabolic hormones would be insulin and glucagon. So insulin helps maintain blood sugar by affecting glucose utilization and storage, which glucagon also affects blood sugar levels. However, it's the opposite function of insulin, so it doesn't affect storage. It actually affects the breakdown. So insulin is going to typically be secreted in the fed state, so that means like when an animal or a human has just eaten. And it's going to decrease the glucose levels in the blood because it's going to be removing that glucose from the blood and storing it. And so the storage form of glucose is called glycogen. So obviously if insulin is causing that glucose to be stored, it's going to increase glycogen. The glucagon just works in the opposite way because in order to maintain homeostasis, if you have one hormone that does something, you have to have another hormone that counteracts that hormone because that's how you maintain balance. So insulin affects storage. Glucagon is typically secreted in a fasting state. So if an animal hasn't eaten in several hours, or if you haven't eaten in several hours, your body is going to need glucose to eventually make ATP. So glucagon is going to be secreted in the fasting state, and it's going to increase those glucose levels in the blood. And so that will decrease glycogen levels because it's going to be breaking glycogen down to supply the body with that glucose. Does that make sense? Okay, so that one was kind of a tough question a little bit because we talked about a lot of different hormones. So just make sure that for the final, you know that for that question, insulin and glucagon are the two major metabolic hormones. So they kind of control metabolism. So number 18, I just wanted you to list 2 of the 5 categories of nutrients. So that would be energy, protein, vitamins, minerals, water. I just wanted 2. A lot of you actually gave me all 5, which was great. Some confusion on this question. Some people put carbohydrates, so I just want to kind of clear that up before the final. Carbohydrates are a source of energy. Carbohydrates are not actually a category themselves. They would fall under energy as a source of energy. So if you put carbohydrates, that's why I kind of had to count off points there. But know for the final that carbohydrates are a source of energy, but energy is going to be your main category. So which of the following is not a volatile fatty acid? We talked about the main 3 volatile fatty acids that are produced by the microbes in either the rumen or the cecum, depending on which animal you're talking about, were acetic acid or acetate, propionic acid, and then butyric acid. So hydrochloric acid, I don't know if anyone remembers, but where does hydrochloric acid come into play? I don't know if I've specifically said this, but any thoughts?
Stomach acid, isn't it?
Yep, stomach acid, exactly. Hydrochloric acid is going to be secreted in the stomach, and that's what's going to actually give the stomach its really low pH and help start the digestion of a lot of different foods. So very good job on that. So number 20 was just a kind of nomenclature question. So when naming carbohydrates, if you have one simple sugar plus another simple sugar, then what is that going to be called? And so it's going to be called a disaccharide because saccharides are the term for kind of simple sugars. And so if you have 2, it's going to be a disaccharide. So I did have some people get kind of confused and they chose diglyceride. Glyceride is the term that you would use for what category of nutrients? Well, what energy source, I guess is a better way to say that.
You said diglyceride?
Yeah, so disaccharide is for carbohydrates. Glyceride would be for what? Not carbohydrates, but the other source of energy. Starts with an F. Fats.
Yes, fats.
Yeah, there you go. So just to kind of clarify on that question, because some people knew that there were 2, so they knew the di part, but a lot of people chose diglyceride. So just make sure that you know that carbohydrates are going to be monoditrisaccharides, and then glyceride is going to imply that it's a fat or a fatty acid. So number 21, one difference between starch and cellulose. So a lot of people seem to be kind of confused, which makes me think I just didn't explain it very well, that starch was like a storage form in animals and cellulose was in plants. So starch is actually found in cereal grains as well. So it's a storage form of energy in plants. And then cellulose would be found in kind of plant cell walls. So they're both in plants as well. So I just want to make sure I kind of cleared that up, just so you know for the final. So the main difference that I was looking for, they're both chains of glucose molecules. However, starch is linked by alpha linkages. And I kind of remember that because starch has an A in it. So it has alpha linkages. That's broken down by amylase. So that can be broken down by mammals. Cellulose is also a chain of glucose molecules. However, it's linked by beta linkages. So only microbes can digest cellulose. So that I was kind of looking for just one of those differences. So if you told me about the alpha versus beta, or that one could be broken down by mammals and one couldn't, one was only microbes, then I gave you credit. But so just to be clear, they're both found in plants. So if you have any other questions about that, let me know. So 22, hydrocarbon chains that range from less than 10 carbons to more than 20 carbons that have a carboxylic acid at one end would be your fatty acids. And then your fatty acids would be attached to a glycerol, but the fatty acid portion is actually going to be that long hydrocarbon chain. So 23, what does the term essential mean in the term of nutrients? So essential means that it can't be synthesized by the body, or it is not synthesized in sufficient quantities to actually meet the requirements. Or it must be, and it must be supplemented in the diet. But I would take kind of either answer. One thing I also just wanted to clarify is that a lot of people put, the body can't synthesize the protein or something specific. And that is true. But so I want you to know that essential doesn't just apply to one category. It could be an essential vitamin or an essential mineral or an essential protein. So it's really just any essential nutrient means that the body can't synthesize it or not in enough quantities to actually meet the requirements. And so something else I want to just touch on with essential as well, just kind of so you know, is that there are some nutrients that are always essential. There are other nutrients that could be kind of conditionally essential. So for example, in pigs, they can make vitamin C, but at weaning, when they're extremely stressed, they can't really make enough to keep up with their body demands. So it kind of becomes essential during a certain condition. So there are certain times where some things are called conditionally essential because their body at that point in time can't meet the demand. So just kind of something to think about. So 24, which of these is not true about fatty acids? So a lot of people actually chose A, that unsaturated fatty acids are liquid at room temperature. That statement is correct. So remember that saturated are solid at room temperature, the S and the S. And then unsaturated are, of course, going to be liquid. And then unsaturated fatty acids are the ones that contain a double bond, which is why they're liquid at room temperature. So the one that was not true would be that unsaturated fatty acids are solid. Saturated S, solid S. So just make sure if you miss that one that you kind of have that straight before the final. So biological functions of protein, there are a lot of different functions of protein. So structural functions, they help form muscle, they form enzymes and hormones. So all of these was the correct answer for that. Number 26 was which element does protein contain that carbohydrates don't? So remember we talked about carbohydrates are sometimes abbreviated as CHO, and that's because they contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Proteins contain nitrogen because they have that the groups on their structure. One of those is called an amine group, and that's what contains your nitrogen. That is the element that makes them different from carbohydrates. So number 27, in protein, amino acids are held together by which type of bond? So that would be a peptide bond. And I can't really think of a clever way to remember that other than protein starts with P and peptide bond starts with P. Peptide bonds are the type of bonds that are found in proteins that link just one amino acid to another to form that protein.
Protein and peptide both start with P.
Yep. That's the only thing I can really come up with to kind of remember that. So number 28 was just a fill in the blank. So young, rapidly growing animals require more or less protein than older animals. So that answer would be more because they're growing a lot faster than older animals who are kind of just maintaining their, body composition. Young animals are going to be growing really fast, so they're going to require a lot more protein because they're going to be rapidly putting down muscle. So that one was pretty straightforward. I'd say for the most part, like 90% of you got that right. So enzymes that are added to pig and poultry diets to break down phytate, which is really important because it makes the phosphorus in grain available to the animals. Those would be phytases. And so I accepted if you put phytases or phytase, and I was pretty lenient on spelling as well. If I could tell what you were trying to say, I gave you credit there. So that would be the phytases. So for number 30, this one I would say most of you got right. I did have a lot of people that didn't really even try this one. So I'll definitely probably be going over the Pearson square again because you're probably going to see one on your final because it is something kind of important. So as far as the answer that it shows, it doesn't really show the work, but I'll kind of talk through it. So the question was how many parts of corn that was 10% crude protein and soybean meal at 22% crude protein are needed to make a ration with 20% crude protein. And so you would set that up with your corn and soybean meal on the left, of course. Then you're going to have your 20 in the middle. And so once you do the math, you're going to get 2 parts corn and 10 parts soybean meal. So really the only place people lost points on this was if you didn't even attempt it or if you kind of made the mistake of carrying down like the ingredient name diagonally instead of across. But that was kind of really the only thing that I really saw. But like I said, I will go over this a couple more times because there were several people that left it blank. So I want to make sure that you all understand and know how to do Pearson squares before the final. Did anybody have any questions about it? Again, while we're talking about Pearson squares? All good? Okay. So 31 was what's the transfer of genes or traits or characteristics from 2 parents to the next generation of offspring? That answer was heredity because that's what that transfer of genes is called. If you remember, epigenetics is when environment influences genes. Epistasis is kind of more specifically dealing with changes at a specific locus. And then the locus is basically just a specific location on a chromosome. So the actual transfer of genes is called heredity. So 32, what's the difference between diploid and haploid cells? Most of you did a really good job with this question. So this was diploid cells have a pair of chromosomes. Haploid cells have a single set of chromosomes. So as long as you kind of gave me some version of that, I tried to give you credit there. 33 was in genetics, a double helix that's composed of 2 strands of alternating deoxyribose and sugar would be DNA. So the way that you can kind of keep that straight is deoxyribose starts with a D. That's what's going to form DNA. Ribonucleic acid is RNA. So if it's deoxy, it's got that D there, that's going to be your DNA structure. Hopefully that helps. But most people got that one right. So 34, which of the following terms means sex cell? So the answer there that I was looking for would be gamete. because of course, the other ones there don't mean sex cell. And so the different gametes would be for the male, that would be sperm, and then for the female, that would be the egg. So those would be the different sex cells. And both of those sex cells are going to be, what, haploid or diploid?
Haploid.
Haploid, right, because then they're going to come together and form a diploid cell. So which of the following is not a base that's found in DNA? The answer for that one would be D, uracil, because uracil is exchanged for thymine in RNA. So RNA is going to have uracil instead of thymine, but DNA is just going to have your adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine. And so typically you're going to have those four, and you're going to have your cytosine and guanine are always going to pair up together, and then adenine and thymine are going to pair up together. Is typically how that works. And so then they'll kind of pair all the way down, and then it'll twist to make the DNA structure. So 36, what's comparative genomics? All I was looking for there was just comparing genomes of different species. Pretty straightforward definition. So if you just put comparing genomes, I gave you credit there. What is the energy source of the cell? So that would be ATP, not to be confused with ADP. ADP is also a source of energy, but it is not the primary source. So ADP is kind of what you get when ATP is being broken down, and you remove a phosphate group. But so the major energy source that you're going to start with is going to be ATP. So make sure that you have that in your head. So I kind of mentioned this a few questions up. Which term describes heritable changes in DNA expression that are not actually encoded in the DNA? And the answer to that one would be epigenetics, because epigenetics could be changes in the DNA that occur from the environment or an illness or kind of really anything that's not directly encoded by the DNA would be epigenetics. The 39 was what's the difference between a homozygous and a heterozygous genotype. So what I was looking for there was that homozygous would be two identical alleles, so a genotype consisting of two identical alleles, and heterozygous would be a genotype consisting of two different alleles at a locus. So you didn't have to give me that word for word. If you gave me something kind of close that showed me that I knew that you knew what it meant, then I tried to give you as much credit as I could there. So I wasn't terribly picky with that question. So 40, which of the following is or are a breeding system that's used in domestic animals? The answer was all of them. So you have straight breeding or purebred breeding. You could have crossbreeding or synthetic inbred lines for grandparent stock. So all of those could be a type of breeding system. So 41, when offspring are superior to the average of the parent, it is known as either hybrid vigor or heterosis. We kind of mentioned both of them. I mentioned hybrid vigor more than heterosis, but that means the same thing. So I gave you credit if you gave me either answer. So hybrid vigor, I think, has now been on all of your tests. So it's definitely something to be familiar with if you missed that question. And then, of course, a good example of hybrid vigor would be what? Any examples anybody can give me?
Mule, right?
Mule. Yeah, the mule is kind of your classic example because it's got traits that horses and donkeys don't really have. They're not quite as hardy or parasite resistant as mules are. So that's always kind of your classic example for hybrid vigor. I kind of thought that my dog, being a lab German Shepherd mix, would be incredibly smart and have insane hybrid vigor because those two breeds are like so smart, and somehow genetically he is really stupid. So it doesn't always happen, but sometimes it can. You know, with actually with cattle and bison, they tried to create a beefalo, if you remember back to the bison lecture, but they kind of, unfortunately, it had the kind of worse meat quality and then the temperament of a bison, so it didn't really help. It kind of just got bad traits from each one, so that happens sometimes. So 42, in animal reproduction, what does the term fertilization mean? So basically all I was looking for there is just that a female and male gamete, so the sex cells, the sperm and the egg, are fusing to form a zygote. I wasn't looking for that word for word, so if you gave me anything remotely close to that, I gave you credit. But if it wasn't, exactly, if it wasn't completely correct, I kind of take off points, but I tried to be pretty lenient on that question. 43, what's the primary reproductive organ or gonad in the male and female? Give an answer for each. So of course, for the male, it would be the testes, and then for the female, it would be the ovaries. I'd say most people got that one right. We already kind of mentioned this one, but 44, the ability of an organism to keep its body temperature within a certain range is known as thermoregulation. I had quite a few people put thermostability, which is close. It sounds like it could be right, but so make sure that you know it's thermoregulation, because you may see that question again as well. 45, male pigs are castrated to prevent an offensive odor or taste of the meat. That's known as boar taint. Most people got that one, so just boar taint, be familiar with that. That's the actual term for it. 46, one difference between mitosis and meiosis. So there were several answers that you could have put for this one. So mitosis is when a single cell divides to form two identical daughter cells, versus meiosis, which is a cell division that results in 4 daughter cells. So each daughter cell has half the number of chromosomes as the parent cell. Mitosis is mainly going to be for growth and then cell turnover, and you're going from diploid with 2 sets of chromosomes to another diploid, also with 2 sets. Meiosis, you're going from diploid to haploid. So I just wanted one difference. So if you gave me just any of those, or even I actually had some people give me another difference that wasn't one I had originally thought of, but they were correct, then I gave you credit. So 47, in mammals, the gene that controls sex is on which chromosome? That would be the Y chromosome, because the Y chromosome is actually what has the genes that code for testosterone on it, and testosterone is going to be what is going to initiate the changes that are going to happen in that zygote to eventually make it a male. So in the presence of testosterone, something will become a male. In the absence of testosterone, it's going to go ahead and develop as female. So that most people got was Y, but just to clarify if you didn't get that one right. 48, so I wanted you to match the reproductive hormone with its function. I was pretty impressed. A lot of people did well with this question. So testosterone is going to be the male sex hormone. Estrogen is, of course, going to be the female sex hormone. Progesterone is going to maintain pregnancy. And oxytocin is going to be what causes uterine contractions and the letdown of milk. So just make sure if you miss those that you kind of go back and review and understand which one is correct. 49, the majority of people got this one right. I only had, I think, a few people that kind of just got confused, which is very easy to do. So in animal growth and development, hyperplasia is the increase in cell number, and then hypertrophy is the increase in cell size. So again, not sure if it helps you, but trophy, you think of like getting bigger, you want a bigger trophy, so it's an increase in size. And then hyperplasia is just going to be your increase in cell number. So if you remember, we also talked about during growth and development that when the animal is most prenatal growth is going to be hyperplasia. So all of those cells kind of dividing into more cells. And then after that, postnatal growth is going to become more hypertrophic growth. So 50, the main hormone that controls growth is, of course, just growth hormone. So that one's pretty simple. So if you got that wrong, just try not to overthink it. I was kind of always that student on exams that I was like, well, that looks too easy, so it can't be that. I'm going to pick this one. But growth hormone is really that simple. It is the hormone that controls growth. So rapid growth that's achieved by optimal nutrition after a period of slow growth and malnutrition would be compensatory growth. So that would be B. And that's growth that's kind of compensating for the lack of growth during that period of malnutrition. So that's kind of how I think about it, is it's compensating for that. Two phases of growth that we actually just talked about. So what I was looking for there was prenatal, which would be before birth, and then postnatal growth, which would be after birth. So that's, I'd say a lot of people got that one, but other people were kind of a little confused on exactly which phases I was looking for there. So for the final, the two phases of growth I'm looking for are prenatal and postnatal. And then 53, what's the main sugar that's found in milk? That was lactose that I was looking for. And then major protein found in milk, number 54 would be A, casein. And then 55, we talked about that growth chart. So which of the following shows the correct order that growth occurs in? So the answer would be bone, muscle, and then adipose tissue. Because you have to lay down the bone, then you're going to put the muscle on top of the bone, and then once you start having a lot of energy left over, that's going to go to fat tissue. So make sure that you have that order correct. And then 56 and 57 were actually extra credit questions. So 56 was what's the stress hormone found in people, pigs, cattle, horses, and sheep? And the answer there would be cortisol. Does anybody remember what it is in poultry? What it's called? I know we mainly talked about cortisol, but it has just a different name in poultry. Anybody remember? Corticosterone. So just a little bit different, same stress hormone, just kind of a different name. And then number 57, in the female reproductive tract, where does fertilization occur? So I had people put ovaries, uterus, kind of the board, but fertilization actually occurs in the ovaries. Of course, there could be abnormal cases where fertilization occurs somewhere else, but typically if it occurs somewhere else, it's not actually going to be a pregnancy that's going to be maintained. So the oviduct is where it should happen, where it happens most of the time, and where it needs to happen if it's going to really develop. So that's what I was looking for there, and those two were extra credit. So again, go back if you're a seated student, go back and check and make sure that your grade in the grade book reflected that change. And let me know if you have any questions. Okay, well that is really all I have for today because I don't want to start anything new right before the holiday. So does anybody have any questions about your exam or your grade online? Feel free to go back behind me and calculate, make sure that I did your grade correctly. I'm human, I make mistakes, so always check behind me. If you find anything, let me know. Or if you have any questions, let me know too. But if everyone's all good, then I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving.
Yep, you too.
All right.
Give Trigger a hug for me when you next see him.
Well, he's like downstairs right now wreaking havoc. So.
Oh, okay.
All right. Well, y'all have a good day. Have a good holiday.
Okay, bye everybody.